All right, we got about a little bit under a minute there before we'll kick off. There we go, noon, perfect. So good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to today's Decisions Lunch and Learn. My name is Morgan Russell. My pronouns are they, them, and I've been with Decisions for 1.5 years now. I'm on the solutions engineering team and ready to go through some questions with y'all. We do have a pre-submitted question, but we'll give the submitter there a little bit of time to get on if they're going to be joining us today. But like usual, if you have attended one of these before, same protocol, we're going to be using the raise hand functionality if you would like to come off mute and ask your question that way. Otherwise, you can type it into the chat and then we can answer it for you there. All right, so we do have our first pre-submitted question that we can take a look at. So I'm just going to move over to there for us. But if you have other questions while we're answering this one, you can go ahead and get those in queue so we can have them ready to go. So I'm going to go to my decisions environment, move over my Zoom boxes a little bit. So just to get everybody on the same page with this pre-submitted question, we had, the context was that the submitter has a folder where they're saving their documents in a designer folder, a flow in which the first user can add documents to the subdirectories into this folder. And then they want to make another flow where another user, user 2, would be able to select a subfolder name and then convert the documents into a PDF. And they're having difficulty finding a way to get that user to get those subfolders that was created by user 1. So off the bat, I drafted up a quick lucid chart to kind of map out my thoughts for this of what would be a decent answer there for your second flow. So like I said before, that first flow, you're having a user adding documents to a particular subfolder or folder. And the second flow, we want to have a user be able to pick a subfolder and then have those documents in that folder converted to a PDF. So if everyone can see my lucid chart still, I believe should be good there. We have just, I drew out our little start end steps. Let's start here with a fetch step, and we'll show this back in the flow editor once we move back over. But you fetch those subfolders based off of whatever criteria you want to set up. If you know just that parent folder that they're at, you can just have that as a fetch criteria. You'd want to have some kind of form so that second user can select probably from just a drop down, depending on how many folders you have. You could do a radio button list as well if you only have 3 to 5, but most likely a drop down element there to select which subfolder. So this here is pulling in all the subfolders, we're populating them in our drop down to select. Whichever one is selected, then we'll use that as a fetch criteria to select the files in that folder. And then those files will be the input to our subflow that we'll use to actually merge those documents into a PDF. And depending on how many documents you have, I set this up as a for each in our diagram so that your list of documents, our merge step, you can input 2 documents, so you're combining 2 each time. So if you have more than 2, you're going to have to loop back through and kind of combine and update that PDF to have multiple pages there. So depending on how exactly you want your PDFs to be merged and created there, you would have more logic in this subflow that we've got kind of graphed out there. So let's go and kind of build this out in decisions. But if anybody has any questions before we move there, I can address that as well. We'll move on over. I'm working in my local, which is, I believe it's on 7.0 version there. And let's create a new flow to call it select subfolder to merge for files to a PDF. All right, so we have select merge to PDF, creating this flow. And again, our first step is going to be to fetch the folders. So that's just going to be using a fetch entity step here. It should be on your favorites. If not, you can always add it to your favorites with the little star here. It's just a very useful step because you can fetch and set whatever criteria you want to kind of filter what data you're pulling in this step, because the least amount of data you're pulling in is the least process power you'll be using there. So I'm going to change the name to say fetch subfolders, because that's what we're trying to do here. And the type here is just folder. So I just pick our default folder decisions framework type. And the fetch criteria kind of depends on what your folder structure is and like if you need to filter out anything in particular. If you just have a folder and the parent, it's just got a parent where it lives in the folder above it, you could just have that be your only thing and have no fetch criteria up here and just pull in all the folders that are found underneath this parent folder. But you could also add in things. I believe it was mentioned that it was a designer folder. If you are designing and building other things in there, you may want to filter out things that are hidden, like history folders and such. So you could add that fetch criteria of if it's hidden, so what hidden equals. I'll get that pop up here. Since we know we just want a non-hidden folder, those are automatically generated for structures or just your designer folders in general. You can then set that to constant and have that be false. We want all the folders results to not be hidden. And I'm actually going to go back real quick to our folder tree here and just make some folders as an example. So let's add a designer folder to say main category. That'll be our top folder, and we can have a subfolder inside here now. And if you're just storing files, I'm not sure on the use case here of this question. If you're just storing files and you're not needing this folder to actually create anything, you're not building rules, forms, or storing any of those items in here, you can just use a default folder. It'll be lighter on your system. It won't have these actions up top. A designer folder allows you, has the pencil, allows you to create decisions, elements inside of it. With a regular folder, which I'll show real quick here. So this will be example subfolder. You will not have those actions present. So now we just created that folder. We're inside of it here. You'll notice those actions are no longer on our bar here. When you right click it, you don't have any of those abilities to create a flow, create a form inside that folder. Like we did here, and this outer folder main category is a designer folder, so it has the functionality to create a flow, create a rule and such. So now we have some subfolders that we can fetch in that flow that we are working on. So I'm going to go back to our main folder here and then drill back into that flow we are working on. So select subfolder to merge files. So now that we know where our subfolders are, we can set that as our parent folder ID. So that means we'll be fetching all the folders that have this folder as their parent, the one right above it. So, sorry, I got a bunch of other stuff here. So we're in Lunch and Learn, and then we know our main category was that folder we just made. You can see underneath it's that subfolder, but in reality, you probably have a lot of other folders, it seems like, with this use case. So we're going to fetch all the folders that have main category as the parent folder there. And I'm going to rename my output here. So it's not the generic entity results. So this will be subfolder list. So that is a list of decisions type of folders. Just to good practice, we will save. Okay, perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Then that is good with your best practice. Just saw that chat. So now we've got our list of folders that we fetched, and you can always check them in the data explorer. There's a little bit of other data, but once it refreshes, that'll be there. So now we want to actually have our form. So we'll just make a really quick form here. Where is our show form step? We don't have any folders. So on the no results path, we can just go to the end step. They won't be able to select them. In your real use case, you'll probably want to show some kind of end form or pop up here to say, tell the user who's running this flow, oh, there's no subfolders, so you can't perform this action or such. So let's quickly dive in and make a new form for us. So we'll create one. Sorry, moving around my little folders here. All right, we're going to create a new form. We'll just do a simple form for us here. This is going to be a subfolder selection form. Get my property panel up here. There we go. Add a quick title. And since it's a simple form in 7, we have that option to just have a show button panel come up. In 6 or any other kind of form, you just drag out your button to have your outputs already. And for this, since we're imagining we'll have a few of them, we're going to have just a combo box. If you have less than 5, a radio button would work fine. But since you'll likely have more, we'll use a combo box here. So this will be subfolder. I don't think I got a colon instead of what we want there. All right, and for the type, we're just going to pass in the name to the actual subfolder. We could do the whole, we'll pass in the full list here. So this can be folder. You can have it be a complex type. When you pass in a complex type to it, you just have to select then the display field. So for the display field, we'll just want to show the actual entity name for the folder. So here's entity name. Let me fix up our label there for us. And this folder is subfolder list. That's the name of the data coming into the form. That'll know that it's the list of options for us. And we've got it in the selected one. So whatever is selected by the user, this is the data name for that. That's going to come as an output on your form. So let's change this to selected subfolder. So we know. So we have a selected folder coming out there, and it's only used for our OK and not for cancel on our output paths. All right, that looks good. It's kind of a wide form. Can I adjust it? Yeah, I'll make it just a little bit smaller. So we don't anticipate the name of those subfolders to be too much bigger than that. All right, that's really all we need here. Potentially, if your form's more complicated, that'll just be one element on it. But for this example, we'll just do that. Save, and we will close now, and we'll be back in that flow. Oops, I'm gonna double click there. There we go. Now that is our form we just made. Minimize these. And we'll have our cancel go to the end step. And let's map in what we have. So since the name was the same case and the basically comes up, decisions reads it as the same, it automatically matched up and mapped the subfolder list since we named it the same as the output of that fetch entities. So that's nice for us there. And the selected subfolder is the one we actually want our user to interact with, so we can ignore it If there's a particular one you wanted to start with, potentially a default one, you could set that to be maybe the first item of your list or such. But we just want them to select that there. So next, now that we have our selected subfolder coming out of our form, we want to now fetch all the files that are in that folder. So we're going to do another fetch entity step. Oops, move this up and down a little. And we'll save. So this will be fetching our files in the subfolder. And depending on the type, what you're saving in that folder, if it's just file, data, that's what you'd use. There's also file reference or document, depending on what you're using there. And now, of course, really the only fetch criteria is going to be that parent folder again, unless you want to filter out different files and such. You have all the fields that are connected to a file or whatever your type is here. You could filter on, say, oh, I only want something modified by you. So this user can only, they run this flow, they could only merge documents that they interacted with. Seems like it's a secondary user, so probably not that case, but you could go forth and kind of trim down what documents or what files you want to be merging with those fetch criteria. But off the bat, I don't think there's anything we'll need to do besides that parent folder ID. So we're going to select this from flow. So we got here our selected subfolder, and we're going to just want to grab that selected subfolders ID. So we have entity folder ID and folder ID. If memory serves, these are the same. We'll pick our folder ID for now, test that out. So that's now our parent folder ID. So this is going to grab all the files in that folder. So we can list this as file list. That's coming out of that subfolder. So now if we have no results, there's nothing to do but end it, can't merge it. You probably do a pop-up or a form to tell the user, hey, there's actually no files in here. That is something you could potentially check beforehand and say, oh, I only want a subfolder, and then loop through them and say, oh, there's actually in this subfolder, there's no files. But just to get it to work, you don't need that necessarily. So now we'll want our subflow to go and actually merge that. Since it's kind of small, we can probably just do it in this one flow. If you imagine and envision to be converting a list of the same file type to a PDF multiple times, I would recommend subflowing it. If you think you probably only use this in this one particular place, since it's only a small loop here, you could just have this loop just be in the actual flow and not subflow it out. But just depending on the reusability in your overall process there. So we'll just keep it in here and start our for each for it. So since we are looking at a list of files, that's going to be our collection here, or a list of whatever your type is, whatever how you're saving your files. So there's this file list, and that'll update for us there. It's best practice to rename your item so you know what it is. Ours will just be file index and such. And we'll rename our step for each file. So we're going to go for each file. And our done step is going to be going to the end. Probably slide this over a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to get our actual merge PDF step. I think it's merge documents, maybe. Let's see if we can get it. There you go, merge PDF documents. Right, line those up for us. And we're going to go for each of them. So for each file, we're going to go through and say this list of documents combining with the next. Oh, so we might have to snatch the first one. So let's go through. So for document 1 will be the document that was previously built out. Document 2 is the one that we're currently on. So it'll be file, and we're passing in the list of bytes. So that's the contents of a file. And then we're going to be updating it with one. One will be the previous one. I think the best way to do that, because we want this one to be iterating every time and changing. So let's rename it first. So we have our whole list here, and we're going to pass it in and update it. So let's do a create data step. Why my brain is having a time here. Let's think it through. So we need to grab the second one to update it. So we're going to create our updated list. And it is bytes. This will be our merged list. And put that type. Make sure that's matching for us. Merge byte list, because we want something to be able to pass through and constantly update that. So if you have multiple documents here, multiple files, you're going through each of them. And select that from flow. Index. Updating our merged byte list as we go through. But the first one will actually be that one as well. Merged byte list. So I think we might be able to create this on the outside before the loop, since we don't need it to be going through each time. But then just iterating after and updating with each one. This will be our create merged byte list. And from the top, we can just have this be the first one or be blank. We go through the blank, merge one, it'll just be the same document as PDF. Yeah, we'll have it set to constant blank there. Sorry, the lines are all jumbled up for us. There we go. Okay, so now we have that. We have our blank list goes in. First, we take our whatever file we're currently on, merge those together. So the first iteration, it'll just be, the item 0 index and merged in, pretty much still be itself. Go through the next one though, it will update and have that list. Since we changed value, have that previous ones merged will be our document 1. So that is one way to do it there. Let's debug it here. We won't have any files in, so it's probably going to go here, but let's just debug it to test that out for us. We're pulling in those names correctly. This form is so big. Okay, so we got our form, our simple form. We have our drop down, and we have some subfolders there, main category and example subfolder. To check main category is the folder itself. So maybe we'll have to have another filter there to not fetch the filter, the folder that it is containing. But example subfolder there. That's what we want. We go through. Yeah, we actually didn't have any files in there, so that's why we went down the done path. see if we can get a file in there. I was originally looking at adding it as a document here, but let's do it with a file so we can test that out. Yeah, so if you've got your files already in there, that should work for us. I don't know if it'll work for a document as well. Just that folder ID, constant. Go and snag that for us real quick. So we want to put it in that subfolder. So I'm going to grab that subfolders ID. There we go. Copy that. Go back to our flow. Yeah, some of the steps in 7 I've updated. So if you have a folder ID, set it to constant, it'll give you the form to actually go and select from the folders in the folder tree. Some of them still are just looking for that string. So kind of depends which element you're looking at there. See if I got a decent down documents. Something easy. Best practice quiz seems good. It's already a PDF, but see if we can fetch it. Double click there accidentally. Here we go. Like that. Pick our subfolder. Okay, so yeah, since it's a document instead of a file there, didn't fetch any in that section. But did that answer your question with this process here? If not, we can go through that a little bit more or talk about your use case if it's a little bit different than kind of what I worked through here. Checking chat. Get into that subfolder, yeah. Yeah, that fetch should do it for you there. And then just specifying then from that selected folder, getting there. Yeah, no problem. Happy to help for it. Yeah, sometimes like you think like folder navigation be like easy. It's kind of tucked away in there. All right, very cool, very cool. All right, if anybody else has any questions regarding this before we move on to something else or just anything in general, you can use that beautiful chat box or use the hand action. Let's see, nice. Okay, from Scott, have using a fetch entity step on a case entity. So we're going to filter based on the state. This one's a big sad. I really wish we could. From version 6, looked around. No. So unfortunately, just using the fetch entity step here, and let me go quickly into create a flow. We've got a bunch of cases on this environment, so I can demonstrate that. Unfortunately, there is not a way to, on the fetch entity step alone, to on a case entity. But what you do instead, you have a rule collection filter that you can use. So we'll show everybody that. So you have fetch entities. You can only use the fields and properties of something that are kind of the base level. So anything that's in a secondary folder, like in a flow execution extension or a case entity, anything that's in its extension details and those extended folders, you can't actually filter on here, unfortunately. I should have a sample case for us. Yeah, sample case. So when we want to actually add a fetch entity, fetch criteria for it, you only have, whatever fields you provided as well as the deleted on, entity ID and such. So you can't filter on created on date here and such, even though that is a property of your case, it's not accessible here. So what you do instead for that is, depending on if there's some things that you can filter on here to trim down what you need. So if you know date of birth needs to be less than a year and something like that, you could trim down your selection first, or if not, you can fetch them all and have this be your case list, all your records, and then you want to use a rule collection filter, which I will pull out. So rule collection filter is super handy, especially in this use case where the fetch step alone will not let you filter. So rule collection. There's also a flow collection filter, but for this one and for most use cases, if you're not needing to do any additional logic, a rule collection filter will usually be enough for you. No results, we'll go to end step. And results, we go to the rule collection filter. So in the rule collection filter, it'll update just like the for each, what type. So if we pick our case list for type, we can show that here. So we grab our case list, click off, should update. So it still says string here. If we save and come back in, we should be able to get that to update for us. Okay, so now that's updated to a list of our particular type. So now what you have here, it develops a rule for you, and it's going to filter everything that you send through. So that list, that collection that we send in, it's going to send all of those items through this rule and then output either a list of matches, non-matches, or both. So if you hit both, it'll output two different things, like, okay, this failed your rule or this passed. Most use cases, and what I've used it for, has just been matches. And once we edit the rule, it'll be a little more clear how that works for us. So once you're in a rule that was automatically created for you in your rule collection filter step, you have a thing called an entity, and it should be the type that your collection is that you mapped into the input to your rule collection filter. So it's called just an entity, which basically is kind of like the item that you're particularly looking at. Again, it's sending in that whole list of that type and gonna check this rule against each of them and then sort match or non-match. So for this case, we're looking at state. So you go into its entity. Now you can actually go into the extended folder and go through and find that state for us. Here we go. So now you can say, okay, for this case entity, I want to filter out just to get a list where state equals started or completed, or state does not equal something. So that is how you would go and filter and get your trimmed down list and your filtered list of items there for you. And you can have, a complex statement rule as well and perform more things on it, just like you would in the regular rules editor there. Should save that, come back out, and you can rename your output. This would be, since we said it was only just the started cases, you could say started case list or such. And then that will output your list, filtering on any of those properties that you can't get into because they're in a subfolder on those more complicated types. You can use a rule collection filter or a flow collection filter if you need to do more manipulation on your data there.
It's important to note on the fetch entity step. I'm not sure why it works this way, but on the fetch entity step, if you add the extension type, so if you do your type name as folder and then your extension type name as the case entity, you'll be able to get the folder state only for that particular case entity. For some reason, it doesn't work for flow execution extensions through my testing. I'm not sure why. There might be a DT into it, but that's another way you can get the state as well. Also, you can do it the way Morgan has shown with the rule collection filter. Another way you can do it is you can run a report. You pick a report of your specific type, define the state, filter that report by that specific state, started or whatever. then you can also filter your data that way. So there's multiple ways you can slice this pie. Alex, I think you got a comment over the, can you get to the folder? Yeah, you can do that way. So another way to do it is you can fetch all your folders without using the extension type, filter the state, and then add a criteria that says, hey, get the started state of all my folders. But then on the parent ID, that parameter on the fetch entity step that Morgan showed earlier, you can select where you're storing your flow execution data records or your case entity records, and you can filter out that way. So those are just some other methods that you can do the exact logic that Morgan showed.
Nice. That is super useful. I did not know the extension type with it is super nice.
Yeah, it's really weird. I don't know why it only works for case entities, but
well, if you're working with a case, then that's definitely a good thing to know. So
yeah, very true.
Awesome there. So that might be a little bit quicker there if you're just filtering on state, if you have more, but super nice for it. So then you can get all those fields there in your fetch criteria that weren't available otherwise with that extension.
What version are you running, Alex? Do you know? 6.17? Okay, 617. And then I must be doing something wrong on my data. So, but I'm glad it works.
I can check one more.
No, I mean, I found this, doing user actions that using the user action when I get into the actual flow, I do my fetch entities using the folder type with the, the process folder ID that's passed in through the entity object. And that's basically, and then I've got the state to be able to basically limit, user actions based on the state of the data type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another way you can do
works. That's been working 6.15, 6.16, 6.17, and hopefully next week 6.18.
Nice.
Awesome. Okay, then I must have been working on a really older version then, but thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, no worries.
Very cool. That's a good trick. I did not know it. I've been building out my beautiful rule collection filters, but that's a lot quicker to do that extension type. Awesome. That is very good for case entities. And if it's not the case for flow execution extension, that's probably, you can always do that rule collection filter or running a report, which if you're using a lot of filters and you need that data to come out of it, running a report is also, that's rule. Running a report is also a nice option that you have there as far as having your data filtered in an easier format to do it. Run report there. So you just select what report and you can choose what kind of data it comes out as and how you'd like to interact with it afterwards. Yeah. I'll close up here if we are good on that example. Really good questions. Really good questions. Right, and if nobody has any further questions or points of clarity that you'd like to discuss, we could probably end it here and give you all a little bit of time back, but I'll give a few more minutes to check to see if anybody's putting those in chat for us. Take a quick look. Okay, got a question there. There you go. Oh, did I mute?
Yeah, thanks. Just perhaps just a couple of clarifications. So my understanding for user actions against a type, I guess it doesn't really make sense that you have an action with the same name more than once. That would possibly cause issues. Okay.
You can change if you created a user action, you want to change it. I know it doesn't change when you change the name off the bat. So if this was a delete, let's say it was delete record. Let's look it up. So user actions are great for allowing users to kick things off from a report of it. You've got the input of it of the data type. So whatever you build it in that configuration folder of whatever type. So this is the sample case, drill down is the type. And you have access to all the data of whichever one you're selecting. So on that row, that data would get interpreted there. But if you need to rename it, what you can do is right click and set classification info. That's where you can change the action name off the bat. And then if you want to categorize your actions, you could do a category name as well here.
Okay, but I guess, so I have, I mean, architecturally, I'm using a single type to aggregate different flows. And so like I, was, happily going along, and I thought, oh, I need a completion right click action for this particular type of flow, but I had already created a completion action for a different data type. But since they're all kind of aggregated on the same type, that I guess is problematic, right? Because I guess decisions is like trying to, like I have visibility rules as well against.
Yeah, the name are exactly the same because your action name, you could do a category for it if you have like, so you're running these off the same, but it's like a different type or a grouping of your data. You could do his categories and group them up and have visibility rules on the categories.
Okay, yeah, that so like in my rule, I could tag both the action name and the category name kind of thing.
Exactly.
So
and then in your visibility rule, you can hide or show depending on potentially what state it is or a certain field of a record to see what you need to show and hide. And so you don't want the both complete options, available. If the data is in this state, only the one complete option should show, and only the actions in that one category should show potentially.
Okay, cool, I'll try that. And the other thing that I was fiddling around with the other day was diagram tiles. And so I wanted to create a diagram tile that basically had a bunch of different, KPI type metrics on it. And, so to populate them, I was using kind of like a fetch entities, step. And, so it's kind of, I guess the word I'm looking for is messy. As the both paths of the fetch entities keep going forward to the next fetch entities kind of thing, right? So someone gave me the suggestion that I could conceivably use the run report function instead and basically create a series of filters that were runtime modifiable, and that I could conceivably do it that way. But I think that that actually doesn't work by design, and that's really the kind of the clarifying question that I'm asking. Is that like an expected behavior that that I'm not getting the kind of results that I want when I use a run report using a single report with 4 different criterias, expecting it to be able to, adjust to the different criterias from the outside, as opposed to having 4 different reports with a single, criteria that's runtime modifiable from the outside.
I believe it would be expected that you should be able to run, if they're set to be runtime editable, to map in as an input to the start of it. Let me quickly create up a diagram tile, but I believe it's expected that you should be able to runtime select all of them. Have them be runtime editable on that step.
Yeah, so my problem is that when I use a report versus a fetch entities, a run report versus a fetch entities, is that the data always comes back null.
And there is data?
There is data, because when I use a fetch entities, everything works fine. Or if I modify the report so that it's only got one filter that is runtime editable, that works as well.
It only works for one. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a DT then. Okay. I'll quickly try and get a.
But I guess the question is that I'm not sure whether it should work. I mean, like I kind of, in my old person's programming head, kind of think that if something has 2 filters that are runtime editable, then the report is going to want you to provide values for both of those filters.
Yeah, that's what I would expect as well.
So that the idea that you're giving it 4 filters, but only asking it to present data on the basis of 1, that may kind of be expected behavior, that it would not work. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure whether or not that's expected, or maybe that functionality wasn't built out entirely and they said, oh, okay, one should be good. And we're pushing the limits of that a little bit. But I believe if functionality, it would be ideal if it did allow you to do that. Let's take a look at what this is just simple case down one. So you've got multiple filters set here, such as, let's see, field filters. Let's have the date of birth is less than a certain value, and you've got it set so it's runtime editable. And we'll just test it with one first. So if one is runtime editable, we should see that we have an input to it. Did not show us that yet. Let's see if I need to. Now, date of birth is less than. Pick your calendar. Not sure if a date won't do it.
Yes, sometimes, I mean, I don't know if it's the same in the 7 environment as in the 6. Sometimes I have to get right out of the flow and come back in again for the.
Oh yeah, it's kind of wake up decisions. Definitely happens a lot, unfortunately. But there's a lot of moving parts, so it's understandable. Yep. All right, let's wake back in. Okay, yeah. So now we have all the inputs for that one. Different ones for the time variable, calendar value, date value, and just the regular value. Let's see if is that specified. So you get to pick which one there. That was our inputs. Let's see if we can do another one created by equals. And we'll have that be also runtime editable. Show picker. We'll just have it come in from the start. Yeah, looks like you're right for that. The report is a little more bulky there. Go. Okay, we have created by equals here. So you're saying, were the inputs all accessible when you created the multiple? It just didn't respect them?
It just doesn't, when I run the flow, I get nothing back.
Mm. Even though on the report, there actually is data there. Mm. That's not fun. We'll swap this from date of birth to, actually real quick, we're gonna just create a new report here because this one does not have much data. So I'm going to create a new report here and just do accounts. I know I got a bunch of accounts on my local environment. Add some data for us. Good job, lady. Okay. And put some filters on for us. Let's do account type. And let's add another filter for us. Let's just say we can do created by. So we can get multiple or modified by equals. Show all data one. Just checking what the different types are for the actual account. Okay, person or machine, yeah. Okay, so now we have our two types. Account equals machine or person, modified by for that email address. All right, and we're gonna have to close and come back in there. Updated those. Okay, so now we have our two inputs, account type equals. So now you could set this as something that's dynamic coming from the start. So if we selected from flow, this one doesn't do inputs. Oh yeah, because it's a diagram. So we'll have this be constant here for us for this use case. It'll be person and then modified by constant, and we'll do .com. We'll save and run that and see how that shows for us. Ooh. There we go. Took a sec. Yeah, let's take a look at that output data. So we have a list. Okay, it's running out. Oh, it came out as the not data rows. Let's change that from Excel file to data rows so we can take a look at it, or all report data. Either way there. Try that again and see what we get out. Oh, looks like it failed. Potentially here. Not moving past that step. I'm gonna close and come back in there. Let's take a look. Oh, the mapping seems fine. Port output data might have been that data type swap. Okay, there we go. Check our inputs, our outputs. We are getting 6 items in our report for all the different accounts. This is just all your filter data. So they still came up no data. And is this what you're seeing on yours?
Yeah, I'll actually have to dig this up again and have a look through it and see if our use case is the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know, if I find anything different, maybe we can take it up next week or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Because
Otherwise,
that's not the result I was getting, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look back to what I did to.
Yeah, to create that. It might have been the type change. I did change this to all report data.
Yeah, I was using data row, but I don't think
Okay.
that should really make a big difference.
Yeah, it still should show. Let's see if I try data row. Oop, too quick on that click. Outputs. Yeah, it is showing null for me as well there. That's really interesting. And that's definitely because I modified all of them. So they should have data there. And
okay, so I mean, maybe this is this the data row versus all report data kind of thing? That's.
it looked like it was still showing null in the other one. It still comes up null here. So let's see, I'm gonna edit our report checkpoint before removing a filter. So we're gonna keep one on, remove the other. So we will remove modified by. Real quick, I'm just checking with Scott's there, trying to use the extension type name. The fetch entity is only seeing in the extension type name is the case entity itself. And you picked folder as the first one for your fetch entities. So it should be folder, your first type. Up here should be folder. And then the extension is your, whatever your case or particular structure should be. Jared was saying that worked for your
gotcha.
case
Okay.
entities.
Let me try that.
Okay, cool. All right. And this one up dynamic data row. I'm gonna save and close out of here. Have that update with our one less input. And whoop, map this one back in. This person. debug that. Okay, yep, just with one it'll go through, but with two, I'm still getting exactly what you had gotten there, Alex, where it showed up null. So again, I'm not sure if that's expected behavior. It's certainly odd because it allows you to, and it populates those inputs for you. So I would expect the behavior to be that if you're allowed to put those inputs into a run report step, that it would filter the data for you and apply those. So I would think that's probably a DT.
Okay. So I guess I should open a support ticket for that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, have a little example project just like this, like very small, that you can export and attach to it. If you have pictures and videos, always nice for it as well. You know, they definitely appreciate that. When I try to put in my DTs and tell everybody, that's the best way, just so you can replicate it at the same time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. No problem. Happy to help. But yeah, hopefully that mapping there will help you there, Scott, with your step. And like Jared said, there's definitely a whole bunch of different ways to fetch and sort your data in your flows, which is nice to give you the flexibility there. See what works the best for you.
Yep.
All right, and if there's no more questions, we'll end a little bit early today, and we'll see y'all tomorrow with more questions and more fun times.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. Everyone have a nice day.
Cheers.